With that, let's get started here. I'd like to welcome our panelists, and we have, I'm sorry, we're going to start with just a little overview. We are going to welcome our panelists here in a second. Marlena Edwards is going to talk about building culture and a culture of engagement and to attract and retain best-in-class talent. And we're also going to welcome Brian Revolta. So I'm excited to host today's discussion. And we have these two amazing panelists that are going to get started here in just a few moments. We want to be respectful of your time, and we anticipate this session lasting about 30 minutes. With that, let's welcome our two panelists, Brian Revolta and Marlena Edwards. Brian is a Senior Vice President of Business Development for Incentive Concepts, and Marlena Edwards is the Chief People Officer for HLK. So welcome to you both.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. And Brian, I'm going to start with you. First of all, can you give us a short self-introduction, please?
Sure. I've been with Incentive Concepts for 17 years, born and raised in St. Louis. I've lived here all my life. Been here 17 years, served in many different capacities. Incentive Concepts, for those who don't know, we are a national marketing company. We represent some great brands into the premium incentive channel. And we've got some really cool ways to deliver gifts for people. And so that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit today.
All right. Thanks, Brian. And Marlena, well, you're kind of new to our world, and we're just really happy for you joining us today. We're going to kind of ask Brian to maybe step aside for a few minutes because we're going to keep our session together, just you and I, kind of like an interview format, if that's okay with you. But can you kind of tell us a little bit about yourself and HLK agency and maybe your role with the company?
Absolutely. So thanks first and foremost for having me. I'm originally from upstate New York, Rochester, New York to be specific. And for the last 15 years, I've been based in New York City, where I've worked primarily in the marketing and advertising space, designing and implementing talent strategies with executives to make sure that we are attracting and retaining top talent. I recently joined HLK back in March. HLK is a marketing and advertising agency here in St. Louis that is going through an immense phase of growth. So it's a perfect opportunity for me to join and partner with the executives to build out some amazing programs for talent here.
Great. And I want to do a little shout out to HLK's CEO, Eric Karlovic, who is a friend of mine. He was the one who was kind enough to introduce me to you. So thanks to Eric for that. And next time you see him, tell him I owe him a drink or something.
I absolutely will.
Okay. So workplace culture, let's talk a little bit about that. What does it mean to you, Marlena?
Yeah, so, I think that when you think about workplace culture as a whole, it's a collection of attitudes and beliefs and behaviors that really kind of make up a work environment. And so when I think of culture through an HR perspective, I think about all the things that make us who we are, both positive and negative. And the goal is always to ensure that our culture is shifting and evolving, A, with our organizational goals. I think B, especially now when you see societal norms. And you also just want to make sure that as your organization, whether it's clients or positioning changes, your culture is also evolving as well. So for us, it's really important.
Wonderful, for sure. Very important. And there was a Washington Post article recently, and the title read, America's workers are exhausted and burned out, and some employers are taking notice. And you were featured in that article. So tell us about your experience in that interview process with the Washington Post, and maybe what are 3 or 4 major impacts of the pandemic on the workforce from your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, the opportunity arose pretty organically. And it was actually a really great story. An old colleague of mine reached out. We in the past have had a number of conversations around employee morale and engagement and ways to address retention. And so she reached out because a journalist friend of hers was working on a piece about burnout. And I obviously admired and respect my colleague. And so I agreed to an informational call, not knowing really what would come out of that opportunity. And I connected with Soo Yoon, and the rest, as they say, is history. But what it forced me to do was really think about the real impacts of burnout. As an HR professional, we hear a lot about that across the board. I think, both at HLK and at other agencies that have been at both pre and post pandemic. And I think four things that really have come out of COVID as really kind of employees questioning their lives, what motivates them, what makes them happy, and are they fulfilled? I think that never before from an HR perspective have organizations had to deal with people just questioning, is this really what I want to do? Usually you have somebody joining an organization and it's just like, yes, I want to be here. This is what I want to do. But COVID really kind of repositioned that for people. And so that's one of the major impacts, I think, dealing with an employee population who isn't sure about what they want out of life, I think, in general. I think it really kind of solidified the importance of strong leadership and engagement, especially in a remote environment. And so, a lot of us have been home for the last year and a half, and we never really had to focus on really the type of engagement in a way that we do now, especially when you're not in person. I think that connectivity, especially in marketing and advertising, you really have that in-person high touch situation. And it's forced, I think, us specifically to really think about the types of leadership and the types of engagement initiatives that we have. And I think, really focusing on tangible rewards beyond just, the performance review period or a bonus time frame. So really, how do we keep employees engaged throughout, not just the pandemic, but future forward?
Wonderful. And you said engagement probably 20 times in this past paragraph or so, which is fantastic. But let's talk specifically about how engagement with employees impacts an employee's performance.
Yeah, so when you think about engagement, it really is about the emotional commitment that an employee has to an organization, right? And so obviously, I feel like that's a critical factor in employee performance, because if an employee is not motivated to do their best, if they're not proud of the work that they're doing, if they aren't aligned to an organization's mission or values, there's a high likelihood that they're not high performing. And as organizations, obviously, we're looking for people to be high performing. And so we need to look at the levers that we can pull to really kind of ensure that there is engagement.
For sure. And productivity, performance, those are all kind of buzzwords out there. And are there any specific maybe examples or strategies that you've used recently to either recruit new people or retain your talent?
Yeah, so for HLK, I think it was a critical turning point as the business scaled, really kind of looking at being headquartered in St. Louis and solely in St. Louis previously. We've shifted our entire model. And so we've offered all of our employees the opportunity to continue to work remotely as offices do begin to reopen. We've heard loud and clear that employees really want to be able to do their best work, but have the freedom to decide where they do that work and how they do that work. So we've shifted that model, and it allows us to really kind of tap into talent that we weren't really able to access when we were solely, focused on the St. Louis market. Conversely, I think, we've heard a lot about people who really do thrive in an office environment. And so we're maintaining our headquartered office. We're encouraging people to take advantage of the space to foster connectivity. But, when you think about how we've shifted, we literally had to think about budgets and how do we create moments where everybody can come together, especially when we've now started hiring people across the country. So there are at least 2 times a year where we'll bring our employees together for in-person connectivity, programs, engagement, parties. And then lastly, I think it really is creating an environment and encouraging managers to really kind of recognize high performers. So whether that is through like weekly shout outs or really kind of specifying the work that was contributed in our newsletter, or nominal thank yous such as like gift cards, whether that be through Grubhub or coffee vendors, or if it's just really kind of thanking people for their engagement in our social and our social programming and events as well. So, bottom line, I think humans really want to have an impact and be recognized for that impact. And so that's what we're seeking to do.
Wonderful. And I don't know about you, I love receiving those Grubhub, just those simple coffee things. I mean, they don't take a lot and they mean just so much to people. I think it's fantastic. Let's get a little dive deeper into maybe employee recognition, and what are some specific ways at HLK that you incorporate employee recognition into your programs, and maybe what are 3 or 4 of the most powerful ways that you recognize employees?
Yeah, so I think that, when you approach recognition, there are a few things to really kind of keep in mind. Obviously, it's your audience. You really do want to have some finger on the pulse around what motivates the audience that you're trying to reach, and also really kind of what rewards will resonate. My personal POV is that recognition programs generally have to be multi-pronged, right? So there is day-to-day recognition and feedback. So, really kind of thanking people is one way, documenting and writing or sending emails saying like this person did this thing in an amazing way. They're really kind of formal recognition programs. So when you talk about whether it is, anniversaries or birthdays or births, or whether we are saying, we're going to do spot bonuses or spot gifts to recognize talent, we really want to find those formal ways to embed it in the culture. And I think that there are really kind of rewards. So how do we really kind of, when you talk about high performers, are there programs that really kind of speak to those people that say like, hey, you've done so much, we recognize what you've contributed. How do we want to really kind of send that message that's appreciated, it's noticed, and a lot of times that can be through gifting as well. I think for us specifically, holiday gifting is something that everybody at HLK generally looks forward to. We put a lot of thought and effort into it. It's a time of year when you're hustling, you're trying to reach those end of year numbers that people are generally putting in a lot of time, especially when they're thinking about being with their families. And so last year, we created more of a store model and really thought about what gifts would resonate, but really allowed our employees the opportunity to pick what really worked best for them in their lifestyle. And it was, a good experience to sit with partners to think through what would really, be appreciated by our employers as we thought about gifting as well.
Well, fantastic. Well, Marlena, thank you so much. It's been great to have you on, and we just really appreciate you joining us and offering your expertise and perspectives. And if you don't mind sticking around for a little bit, we're going to have Brian do his presentation. Maybe you can provide some extra feedback if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for taking
Okay.
me.